Good morning, All Souls Community Church. Pastor Will here, Thursday, September 17th. Question for you. How are you doing this morning when it comes to the issues of politics and race in particular? How are you doing? I hear so much chatter from friends and family when it comes to things like football on Sunday and, oh, they're taking a knee or they're not taking a knee or the baseball games or basketball games or what people are reading on the news and the violence that's there. And how are you doing with all of that? Maybe a more specific question. As the people that you talk with hear your heart, understand your perspective on things, would they say that you're a humble person when it comes to issues of politics and race, injustice for that matter? Would they say that you're humble? Because here's the deal. If you're a Christian, we are called to actually be like Jesus, humble. We are called to be like Jesus. And no matter what the issue is, that should be one of the things that describes us best. And I'm not saying this because I'm great at it. Please don't hear that. But what I am saying is, I think there's a challenge for us, not just today, but for the weeks ahead of us. There's a challenge for us, even when we disagree with people, to be humble, to treat people as image bearers of the King and not as ideas, to be humble. This week, we've been talking about pride, and humility is the opposite of pride. And there's a person in the scriptures who's referred to as the most humble man who ever lived. You know what his name was? It was Moses. Moses, in Numbers chapter 12, the chapter before the chapter that we looked at on Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, if that made any sense whatsoever. Moses, the most humble man, and he's called the most humble man. I want you to realize this in the context of conflict. His brother and his sister, Aaron and Miriam, are taking issue with him. They're grumbling against Moses as the leader of the people. And it's not just in the context of conflict in general, but it's actually in the context of racial conflict. Because in the text it says that they took issue with Moses because of his Cushite wife. His Cushite wife meant, first and foremost, that she was a foreigner and therefore not from Israel. But in particular, Cush is what we know as modern-day Ethiopia. And so you have racial conflict here in the context of this conflict between Moses and his brother and sister. And the interesting thing, a few things pop out to me in this text. First, why is Moses called humble? How do you get there? Well, I tell you this, humility oftentimes comes when you are in the presence of greatness, right? When you see or get to meet someone great. I remember I got to meet General Norman Schwarzkopf when I graduated with his son from University of Richmond. And that was one of the most humbling experiences of my life, to meet a 5-star general. When you come in the context of greatness, it humbles you. Well, this same is true here in our text where it says that Moses had the privilege of not being like other prophets who God would just speak in an audible voice to other prophets and they would communicate what God says. He says, no, Moses is unique. Moses is special. Moses got to be in the presence of God, to see his form, to speak face to face like a friend does to a friend. God is the one who says, Moses is a special dude, which is why Moses is called the most humble man who ever lived. But you know how else God makes us humble, allows us to grow there, is by allowing conflict in our lives. It's by putting us into situations that are too big for us, that we can't figure out, that are going to kind of push us down a little bit, maybe work it out like a potter with clay, and that God is going there to develop humility in us. For Moses, both of those things were happening. He was in conflict regularly, and in particular here in Numbers chapter 12, but he was also daily coming into the presence of someone far greater than himself, Yahweh, God, the Lord himself. The interesting thing about this in our current context is you can't escape conflict in our world right now. It's all over the place. And you can't escape racial conflict in our world. It's all over the place. You can't escape that sense of being overwhelmed by the problems around us. And yet God daily invites us to a closer intimacy than Moses himself had. Do you realize that? Moses met with God in the tent of meeting and got to see his form. And God says, I'm going to make my tent of meeting you, your heart, and you get to interact with me there. More intimate, closer than Moses ever knew God to be. And as you come into the context of that greatness and then come back into the context of conflict, specifically racial conflict, do you know what that should be producing in you, in us, in each of us? Yeah, humility. Humility. Humility that's willing to say, I want to understand you before I defend myself to you. Humility that's willing to say, I could be wrong, I could be deceived. That's kind of the definition of deception. Humility that says, even if I don't agree with everything you're saying, what are the parts about what you're saying that I can learn from and agree with? Humility that says, I'm going to put your needs and interests above my own and serve you, even when it costs me, even when it's not fair. Humility. That's the way of our King. That's the way of Jesus. It's been the way of our God from the beginning. It's why Moses is lauded as the most humble man. And it's what God invites us to walk in. Humility. It's not weakness. It's not denying things. It's looking brokenness, conflict, racism right in its face. And knowing that the one who's got our back is bigger than all of it, so that we can then say, Lord, show me. Show me how you'd have me learn. Show me how you'd have me grow. Show me how you'd have me serve and love my neighbor as myself. Today, friends, my encouragement for each of us is to get into the presence of the God who's bigger than we are, that we might be humbled there and in awe of his wonder. And then to turn and see, Lord, the racial conflict in my life, the political conflict, the familial conflict in my life, how are each of those things and all of those things opportunities for me to know you better, for me to walk in humility and show the world more accurately who you are, and in so doing, to change the world in front of me. That's what our God has always been about doing, and it's the very thing that he invites us to enter into today. I pray that you will, and that you'll be blessed as you do it. Let's walk humbly together after our God. Amen? Have a great day.